Socrates goes down to the underworld, much like Demeter goes into the underworld. In a way, he's going to see a beautiful thing in the midst of the darkness. A festival which is new. It involves torches being passed from one hand to the other on horseback. It is an image of power and strength in the horse. It is an image of light in the torches. It is an image of newness and brilliance and beauty. Socrates, drawn by that beauty in a erotic fashion, goes down into the underworld to see what this beautiful thing is. In doing so, he is like Demeter. But then, after seeing this, notice he's not intending to hang around. His whole intent, it says, is to go back up to the highest city, to the Acropolis, after they had finished. And he suggests here, after we had prayed and looked on, we went off toward town. And catching sight of us, Polemarchus and others, the other men that were down there that lived in Piraeus, came in and grasped him. And Polemarchus says to him, "Socrates, I guess you two are hurrying to get away to town." So Socrates and Glaucon are actually headed back up to the Acropolis, back up to town. So he's going down and the other one is headed back up to town. Now, in this instance, there's another reference, albeit in mask form. There's a reference to another myth, the myth of Orpheus and Eurydice. In this myth, the great poet and musician, Orpheus, loses his beloved woman, Eurydice. And she goes down into the underworld, and he is given permission to go down into the underworld to seek for her. And he goes down into the underworld to seek for her, and there he says to Hades, "Please let her out, I'll play you a tune." And he does, and Hades is weeping, and Persephone is weeping. And Hades says, "Fine, take her, but don't look at her as you go out. Play your instrument, and she'll follow." So Orpheus goes back up, playing his lyre, and he is leading Eurydice behind him. And as he's walking along, plunking on his ukulele, he gets close to the surface, and he turns around and says, "Honey, we're home!" Drat. Because she's faded away. She's evaporated. This story represents, to some degree, the attempt of our work to capture past experience. Always failing, getting a large portion of it, but always failing, and therefore there's always this longing, this eros, for instance, as John Tavener suggests, that music conjures in a person. I want more, I long for more. Orpheus can't give more because he can't get Eurydice completely out of the underworld. She's in that dark realm of memory, but she can't be fully recalled. So, in this story of the Republic, Socrates is headed back up to the high city of light, out of the city of darkness, and behind him, metaphorically, is Glaucon. Consequently, the parallel here is between Socrates and Orpheus. And Glaucon, to Socrates, Orpheus, is Eurydice. Well, on their way out, they get accosted, much the same way that Persephone gets accosted by Hades. Because as they're going out, we have Polemarchus, the son of Cephalus, who orders the slave boy to run after us and order us to wait for him. So the slave of Polemarchus comes after Socrates and grabs his shirt sleeve and says, "Please wait for Polemarchus." And so Socrates does it. And he waits, he lingers. Polemarchus comes up with, as it says, Adamantus, Glaucon's brother, Niceratus, the son of Nicias, and some others, apparently from the procession. And Polemarchus says, "Socrates, I guess you two are hurrying to get away to town." "No, that's not a bad guess," I said. Well, he said, do you see how many of us there are? Of course. Well, then, either prove stronger than these men or stay here. And Socrates says, isn't there still some other possibility? I'm persuading you that you must let us go. Could you really persuade, he said, if we do not listen? There's no way, said Glaucon. Well then, think it over, bearing in mind that we won't listen. That exchange is pregnant with information. I mean, there's a lot there that one can take out of it. One thing to notice, for instance, is that Polemarchus recognizes that Socrates and Glaucon are on the way out. They're trying to get away from the dark city. And they fail. They fail. Socrates was gone down originally out of almost mercy, almost erotic draw towards beauty. He is now lingering because he doesn't want to refuse those men that are coming up behind him. But in so doing, he finds himself nabbed, trapped. And in that dialogue that goes on between the characters, when Polemarchus says, do you see how many of us there are? Socrates says, well, of course I see. The vision, the sight, comes up over and over again in the work. Vision or sight is important. It's like the mind's eye, which parallels physical eyes. And Socrates is asked, don't you see how many of us there are? Number, right? Pythagoras. And Socrates, well, of course I do. Why? Because I have very clear vision. I am a just man. And then Polemarchus says, we overpower you. You see how many of us there are? We're going to force you to stay. And so he almost threatens Socrates. We get a sort of metaphorical capturing here. A metaphorical seizing of Socrates and Glaucon and dragging them back down into the dark. And although it's playful, although it's, it's masked in the sort of give and take of friends, nevertheless, there is an implication of him being captured by the powers of darkness, the powers of the underworld, and dragged down into the underworld again. He even says, couldn't I argue with you? What if I can persuade you of this? And Polemarchus says, you can't, because we won't listen. We refuse to listen. Which again represents the inability of a person to argue with those powers of darkness. Glaucon himself says, there's no way to argue with this. We can't argue with